Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of the Timelines podcast presented by the Watch Preserve. The Timelines podcast is meant to provide a platform for captivating conversations with watch collectors, enthusiasts, and fascinating individuals alike. Through intimate and insightful interviews, we aim to showcase the diverse experiences and perspectives of our guests as we uncover the timeline of each guest's path through the world of watches. So join us as we embark on this fascinating exploration of timepieces and the individual wearing them. On Timelines, every watch has a meaning and everyone has a story. My guest today is a familiar face around the Watch Preserve. Maybe you've seen some of his awesome paintings on our Instagram or maybe here in store. He's a multifaceted artist whose live paintings of watches and his menswear sketches, as well as his sharp personal style, all demand attention. He's the one and only Matthew Miller, Sunflowerman. Matthew, welcome to the pod.
Hello, Michael. Thank you, Watch Preserve Universe, for having me, welcoming me in to not only the actual store, but your ears as well.
Awesome to have you here, man. I'm so glad that we could find some time to sit down and do this. And I think as the first guest for our podcast, I think you're the perfect choice. You've got the connection with us here in store, as well as a really interesting journey, I think, into wristwatches. So for those of you who have not yet had the honor of seeing your work or experiencing what it is you do, could you just give us like the elevator pitch of how you found yourself in this universe?
Yeah. I mean, this will be like a 100 store elevator, or a story elevator. So we got a long way to go, and I can give you
Yeah.
that pitch. I'm a men's fashion and watch illustrator. So I do fine art, watercolor paintings of men's fashion and watches. That's pretty it. Just reiterate the same thing
Yeah.
twice. I think that's how an elevator pitch works. Uh, yeah. So basically, for commercial advertising and for the walls at your home, I create awesome works of art that require a bit of skill and a lot of attention.
It's really, really cool what you can do. I've seen you do some amazing things here in store, ranging from all kinds of different watches and also different styles of watches too. I mean, do you always work in the same kind of medium, or do you like to shake it up a little bit?
I like to shake it up. I get bored very easily. So I can be so in love with a painting and be like, I can do this forever. And then 2 days later, I just have to do something else. Just have to. But I love watercolors so much. I love drawing and I love watercolors, and I get to combine those two. A lot of my process, and if you're watching on video, you can see behind me a couple of paintings, and these are following this process pretty closely. So I'll do an ink drawing, so I get to scratch the drawing itch, and then I do a lot of watercolor
Hmm.
layers over top of that. So we're scratching the watercolor itch as well. And yeah, I mean, I love watercolors. Part of what I like about watercolor is, well, I mean, I think we're going to get into that. Well, I'll let us get into that in a bit, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Um,
I was gonna say we can get into the weeds on your method a little bit, but before we kind of get there, I mean, already finding such a talented professional working artist is already a special thing, and then finding somebody who's so specialized in what they do in the worlds which they work in. How did you start painting and drawing? I mean, from a kid, did you get into that? Did you go to art school at all?
Yeah, well, I mean, we can go way back. So I tell everybody I was born with a pencil in my hand. I've always been drawing. It's just a part of who I am. I didn't choose it, it chose me. And here we are
Mm-hmm.
today. But I did go to art school. I dropped out of two different art schools, one in my hometown in Grand Rapids, Michigan, called Kendall College of Art and Design, which is a part of Fair State University. It's so many syllables, but I dropped out of that. And I went to Atlanta, Georgia, and I attended Savannah College of Arts and Design as well. And great facilities, a better program overall. They just pour more money into it for one. Atlanta's a much bigger city. I
Sure.
just realized art school wasn't for me, so I dropped out again and just started to figure out what a career looks like.
That's fascinating to hear. Like, I think a lot of people who aren't used to working with artistics and creatives sort of think that maybe going to a form of higher education is sort of a requirement, And certainly in my field with music, it definitely is. A lot of people don't take you seriously without a master's program. So, what kind of challenges
Yeah.
did you experience sort of moving away from the academic world of art and just having to hack it for yourself? What was that like?
Yeah, well, I mean, I also want to touch on you here, Michael, real quick, because I don't know how much the people of the Watch Preserve know about you, but you're a fantastic artist yourself. You sing in the opera. Now, I can't
Hmm.
speak well on opera, so I can't give people the details, but you figure that out, and you love watches. Your watch knowledge is deep and wide. So I wanted to make sure we got
Appreciate
that
that.
clear as well, because you did not introduce that
Hey,
aspect.
I appreciate it. I've hinted at it a couple times in some of our stories, and I'll tell you what, Nick, our owner here at the Watch Preserve, basically tells everybody who walks in the store the second I go and grab a watch, they're like, "Oh yeah, yeah, he's a watch guy and an opera
Yeah,
singer." Thanks, Nick. He's always. I should hire him for my personal PR team. Really, you know.
it's good to have those kinds of people around for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so after that little tangent, I forgot completely what you just asked me.
Oh, sure. So, what was the beginning of your freelancing career like? Were you finding sort of
Yeah,
commissioned pieces? Were you finding putting your stuff up in galleries?
yeah. I mean, this will take us a bit of the menswear journey, and it'll jump pretty quickly into the watches journey because I dropped out of art school, and I really had no idea what I was going to do with my
Hmm.
life. Like you go to elementary and middle school and high school, for our American audience, and then you go into university. Like that's the track you're
Yeah,
supposed to go on. And so I tried it, and I realized the university aspect wasn't working for me. I needed to find something else. And it's not like I graduated top five in my class in high school. Like I always got good grades. I did the work.
hmm,
I figured out the system. I could do it if I wanted, and I just it just didn't make sense to me. And so like I
sure.
was lost. What do you do when the thing you were supposed to do is no longer in front of you? So I just started drawing and painting whatever I could, whenever I could. All of my time was focused on moving forward with the career or figuring out if that was right for me. And I stumbled on menswear kind of accidentally. I had friends who, I mean, this was over 10 years ago. I mean, this was early menswear days or middle menswear days, like hashtag menswear, when that was such a big deal in the world, like
Hmm.
men finally realizing that they could dress well and be proud of it. And so I kind of caught onto that wave, and I realized this was an interesting aspect of life, dressing well and being interested in the quality of your clothing. And I kind of jumped on that wave, and I found a place for myself in the world. And I never wore a watch ever, like not that I can recall in my life. I didn't know anybody who wore a watch. Nobody in my family wore one. So I got on this menswear wave, and I found on Instagram, the early days of Instagram, the watch community was there. And I was confused because we were taking like these wrist shots, right? Like, why? Who cares?
Yeah,
I
right, right, right.
but they were so passionate. They were so passionate. And I wanted to understand, like, okay, watches are a part of fashion, even though like the industries really are very separate. But as a consumer, they make so much sense together. So I wanted to explore what that was, why people cared about it. So I put out a call on Instagram for people to share their favorite watch, along with the story of why that was their favorite watch. And I painted 100 watches in 100 days and got 100 stories of why watches are interesting. And from there I got the
Wow.
bug, and I've been in on it ever since.
I really feel, Matt, like the serendipity of, I think, of a story like yours to kind of come along at the perfect time for
Mm,
this. I remember, I like, what was it, maybe 2010, 11, kind of when a lot of this menswear stuff started to pick up. Like you said, about 10, 15 years ago, maybe. Correct me if I'm wrong
sounds
on
right.
that. But
Yeah.
but for that to happen at the same time that Instagram is really, really taking off, as well as the watch community is coming out of the dark corners of the internet that everybody
Right.
used to live on, and then to come along and have the ability to, I don't want to say capitalize because it sounds cheap, but utilize the skills that you have and sort of find your way into this industry is really a cool serendipitous thing. I remember, for me, the journey into watches and into, because when you're 14, you don't care how you dress or anything
Yeah.
like that. But, as I was getting older and sort of, coinciding with this new wave of menswear and men's fashion on the internet, for me the catalyst was kind of James Bond. I
Mm.
don't know if you were ever into any of the Bond stuff. There's a couple websites out there, how to get this look from this movie, without spending $500 on a Sunspell polo. And so as a teenager, me and my brother, that was huge for us.
Mm.
And learning about cars, and that kind of led into Formula One, and learning how to dress well, and that led into watches and other things like that. I think for people that, especially men who maybe never really cared, but people who had the interest in that, that was a really interesting time on the internet to experience all of these things sort of in one go. I'm trying to think of a couple people that you may have drawn influence from, or met. I know we've talked before about the sartorialist, or people like Robert Spangle at
Yeah.
1,000 Yard Style.
Yeah.
Did you find yourself kind of coming up around the same time as these guys? I mean, who was active in the space when you were starting?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. I was kind of, I felt like I was in my own world. I was in Atlanta at the time, and my entree into the universe was Tumblr. Tumblr was where
Mm-hmm.
hashtag menswear began. That was the epicenter of menswear in the world. So that's where I jumped on, and I didn't know anybody, and I discovered a small community in Atlanta of people who were interested. And so that was really nice. And online, obviously, the sartorialist at that point. This was probably 2011 or 12. He
Sure.
was established. Maybe not. He didn't hit his heights yet, but established, well known at that point. And yes, that was definitely inspiration for me. Robert Spangle, I learned about years later, probably more along the lines of my experience at PT Uomo. And then, I mean, people like Denny Balmaceda in New York, in terms of fashion. This kid
Mm-hmm.
is, I call him a kid because I knew him uh, way back when, like 10 years ago. That feels like a long time now. And
It's a decade.
yeah, that's a long time. Uh, I mean, he can dress anything. He just knows his stuff. Very knowledgeable about fashion and its history, and uh, he can just wear everything. He's an inspiration. He's always been an inspiration, at least in terms of style. And then with watches, oh man, who? I'm trying to really think of inspirations for me in the watch world. I will say
Sure.
a name like Caroline Coleman. She really helped
Mm-hmm.
shepherd me along back in the IW magazine days, when
Oh
Gothic
yeah,
was
yeah.
really involved in IW. Caroline was a great influence for me. And then Andrew McCutcheon from Time and Tide, really
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
a
for
major
sure.
factor in me playing a role in the watch world.
That's really cool. So, as you're making these contacts, and you're establishing yourself in the fashion world and the watch world, I know you've done some work for people like Brew Watches and Frederic Constant. So, could you talk a little bit about how those relationships were established? Was that sort of meeting them through people like Andrew, or were
Mm.
these companies reaching out to you to come in and work for them?
I mean, Brew Watches, Jonathan Ferrer, that's its own specific story. That's also way back, almost a decade ago. He was, I'm starting, I think, to develop Brew Watches, and he loved coffee, and I loved coffee, and we connected via Instagram. And then I visited New York, and we got together. And I don't know, I've just kind of been there along the path. Mostly, from the outside looking in, but I've gotten to observe and own a few of his watches as he's grown up. And then obviously the metric chronograph came out and he exploded. And just really,
Oh yeah.
everybody knows. I mean, look, if I can wear the same watch that Idris Elba is wearing, like that makes me a happy person. And it's made this whole brew watch ride, I mean, kind of insane. To go from just meeting in the
Yeah.
coffee shop, I'm designing some watch, to all of these really cool, interesting people wanting to wear his watches. I love being a part of that story. But Jonathan, yeah, Jonathan's just an amazing guy who his enthusiasm is so authentic. His personality is all about getting to know and appreciate people. There's not a person I've ever met who's even had a hint of anything bad to say about Jonathan. And it's part of what makes everything about Brew Watches amazing. And then, something like Frederic Constant, I think I've been around for a while, so people have known about me for a long time for this reason or that reason. Back in the day, I went to Baselworld, RIP, and did some promotional work with Bulova. And so, you get to know that family of watches that are now under Citizen.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so, yeah, it just evolves. So Frederic Constant's also under that Citizen umbrella, and you meet people over time. It's a small world in reality.
Yeah, it really is. I started working selling new watches at an authorized dealer out here in Plano, Texas, before moving into the vintage space. And what is always mind blowing to me is exactly how small the world is. You see these huge names, Rolex and Tudor or Oris or what have you, and then when you start to meet the people behind them, you're like,
Yeah.
oh, I know this guy, who knows this
Yeah.
guy,
Yeah.
who knows this person, and it's really cool in a way because you can kind of keep the same contacts, no matter where you go in the industry. And
Right.
that's not even beginning to talk about the enthusiast space. I feel like the sort of non-corporate Instagram commercial space or enthusiast space is even smaller, and
Yeah.
sometimes I don't know if you've had this experience. I'm sure you have at places like PD Womo, where you're going through and you're like, yeah, I'm looking for this guy. I don't know his first name. I just got his Instagram
Yeah.
handle. You know people by their handle more than you know them by their name.
Yeah.
And I feel like watches is really kind of a special community in that. I mean, I'm sure you've met some amazing people along the way at these places that you probably wouldn't have met anywhere else.
Oh, for sure. And yeah, anywhere else for any other reason. Like watches bring people together in a way that's, I think, very unique.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of going back to what you were talking about with your 100 Days, 100 Watches project, I love that you included, when you put out that poll to people, don't tell me your favorite watch because, oh, it's a 321 Speedmaster or whatever, but tell me like what it means to you and why you love it.
Yeah.
And I think that at the Watch Preserve, at least, and this is definitely something that you and I have talked about before, kind of the why behind watches.
Mm.
Nobody needs these little things that are on their wrists. We like them because not only do we think they look cool, but we like how they make us feel and the stories that are imbued in them. I'm sure your watches have personal stories to you. Like I know you have that very special Brew watch, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so this is, well, with the way my lights are set up, I guess it's not going to really focus all that well. But the Brew Watch is HP1 with a blue dial.
Mm-hmm. There it is.
I might be the only person who has this exact iteration. I'd have to ask Jonathan.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the way he's going, I'm like, okay, in 20 years, this is going to be. I mean, right now, it's special to me, but in 20 years, this is going to be special to a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Was Brew kind of your first like big kind of watch thing where you were working with a brand?
Great question. Yes, I'm gonna say yes because I don't remember. Like that's such a long time ago. I have a terrible memory for things being in order. Like we evolved to see cause and effect in a sequential order, and I can't do it. Everything's jumbled.
It's all jumbled for you.
Yeah,
Yeah, effect and then cause and then correlation,
right.
right?
And then yeah, it's all over the place. So yes, I'm pretty sure. Uh, I think not too long after my very first time at Baselworld was with Andrew McCutcheon in Time and Tide and Longines. So that was really cool. That was probably my next like big cool moment.
Very cool. And were you doing live painting for them?
Yes, yes. I mean, I have to rack my brain. I was doing some like on-site illustration for the show. Um, I don't remember if any of it was live. It might have been. It must have been, right? Why else would I have been there?
Yeah, yeah, that's true. You could have just shipped it up yourself.
Yeah,
I love watching you do the live painting though because I think a lot of people see the artwork and they think, oh, this is takes hours and hours to do, but it's amazing to see what you can put together in what 2-3 hours or something like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
So how for sort of the art artistic lay people amongst us, what are the, apart from time, what are the major differences working with live painting, where something has to be done that day, versus something that you can really take your time with? I'm sure there's all sorts of things. Maybe you have to compromise here, compromise there, or use different tactics, maybe even different paint materials. I'm really kind of a novice when it comes to the actual differences from that. I wonder if you could break it down a little bit for us.
Yeah, I mean, there's a pretty big difference for me. I don't think the end result for most people is really all that different. Maybe if you have a discerning eye for process and technique, you might really catch the difference. Like this painting
Mm-hmm.
right here behind me, this FP Joint Resonance, is 40 hours of work, maybe 30 hours of work, somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
To really, and my goal is not photographic perfection. I resent that idea altogether. I'm a formalist, so I appreciate light and shape and value. But I think in practice, I'm a bit more of an expressionist. The work
Mm.
itself is about the brush marks, the pencil marks, the pen marks, and then the illusionistic effect of creating an image for your brain. So my process still takes 30 hours to complete, even though I have an expressionist mindset. But the live paintings, those got to be done quickly. Hopefully that didn't just ruin the microphone. Um,
No.
yeah, I mean, I'm doing 3 hours live to go to basically get this in a finished painting at the same size. I mean, I pointed for the podcast audience, I pointed at the painting behind me that took 30 hours. I do
Sure.
that in 3 hours live in the store. Now, technically, it's probably closer to like 7 or 8 hours of total effort because I do prep ahead in the studio before I go live. But yeah, I'm making compromises all the time. Like skipping that detail, skipping that detail. I'm trying to think of a specific detail I might skip. Maybe, I'll skip an indice here or there just because if you're counting, then you'll be mad. But if you're just taking a look, you'll get the idea of what's happening. Uh, yeah,
What's time, anyways? It doesn't, like you said, cause effect.
right. It's like my brain. Like some of it is probably correct.
So you touched on this just a second ago, but I wonder if we can talk a little bit more about it. You said that you like to go not for perfection in the watches, which, at least to my knowledge, is pretty different to a lot of the way that people represent or do watch artwork. From my point of view as a photographer, you're going for the most dramatic lighting and the most sharpness of clarity, so you can crop in on something 20 times and it still looks really good. So you're not quite the opposite, but a different mentality from that, right? You're wanting to make sure that the way that the watch feels or looks, kind of the ethos of the watch, comes across. Is
Yeah,
that
I
right?
mean, I think it comes back to my entree into the industry, to the collector community. I got in it for the story, which for me is I got in it for the emotion. So trying to do a photographic representation, I think there's a different mindset to I need to get every aspect of this watch depicted as perfectly as possible. Which honestly, I think for most of the watch industry, the collectors, the designers, the salespeople, they want to see an image that depicts exactly what it's meant to be in real life because they care about that perfection. They care about the timekeeping quality, the engineering, all of these aspects that are meant to be as precise as possible in real life. People want to see that depicted in a representation of that watch. But for me, the emotion, the story is where I come from. My entry point into watches is that somebody gifted a watch to their grandson because he graduated college. Cool, that's awesome. But there's an emotion attached to that that's not as much attached to the precision of the watch.
Mm-hmm. It's a great answer. I think uh, I think that's beautiful. I think it's cool trying to capture the feeling behind a watch more so than the accurate representation in steel or in gold or whatever it is. So I guess moving along a little bit more with watches, you mentioned earlier that you never grew up wearing watches.
Hmm.
And then as you got invested in this world, you started to, I assume, have a little collection. So, what do you currently have in your watch box? What kind of stuff do you like to wear? What kind of stuff are you looking to add in the future?
Yeah, I mean, my collection is still very middling overall. I'm a poor artist.
Well, it's not
What can I
about the
do?
watch. It's about the emotion of the
That's
watch,
right.
right?
That's right.
You
What
know,
what
I
is the
mean,
story?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Well, you saw my Brew Watch's HP1. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite pieces. Just wear anytime. I love it. I also have the metric chronograph, which honestly, I had a suit made separately from owning this watch that has the color details that match perfectly. I don't know the serendipity around how that happened,
Really?
but you have, I mean, we'll pull the chronograph out here. It has the yellow and the orange on the hands, and that sort of
Mm-hmm.
the black dial and the mint green around the indices on the exterior there, and those are on the stitching marks on the buttonholes of my sleeves, the orange, the yellow, and the
Wow.
green.
That's cool.
I have no
That's
idea
cool.
how
We should
that
take some
happened.
cool photos of that. Yeah.
There are some very cool photos. I guess I will have to share those with you.
Yeah,
Um,
please do.
yeah, something about that just perfect, matched perfectly.
Yeah.
But I mean, I can wear the metric with anything and feel great. I have
Such a good watch.
I have
Such a good watch.
a hand art as well, an MK1.
Okay.
That was probably one of my first, like one of my first. That was one of the first watches I ever had that like felt meaningful because it was the first one, like first
Mm-hmm.
project to kind of negotiate it on my own. Did a couple hand art watch paintings, and I got a hand art watch. Uh,
Yeah.
that's a lot of fun. I need it. I kind of bent the pusher as the little ceramic red ceramic tip on the pusher, and I
Oh,
bent
okay.
that. I have no idea how, so I needed to get it.
Painting too hard, I
But you
guess.
know what? Sometimes it gets crazy in here. It gets crazy. You knock something over. But I need to get that messed with. I have a Longines as well, which it's probably nearby. That I got from my time at Baselworld with Watches and Wonder. I watched. Whoa,
Mm-hmm.
whoa! Time and Tide. We all know what's
Time and
happening right
tide.
now. So
It's watch. Yeah, Watches and Wonders is happening right now. For our listeners listening in the future ahead of us, it started 2 days ago. What's today? Wednesday. Yesterday. It
yeah,
started yesterday.
yeah. So we're second day in. Obviously, that's on my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Time and Tide. So my time at Baselworld. That's what it is. Because I know Baselworld's dead. So it's like what's replaced it?
Yeah, it's gone now. Rest in
Um,
peace.
yeah. From that one, my first trip to Baselworld with Time and Tide, I got that Longines, which was a
Great.
great memory as well. And then right now, what I'm wearing, and I've been wearing this a lot, is this Lord Elgin Clubman, and I'm wearing
Oh
this.
yeah, that's a great watch.
It's fantastic. It's still ticking after all these years. As a beautiful waffle dial. It's just, I mean, obviously you're not seeing
Mm-hmm.
it very clearly here. Uh, just great to wear. Simple, fairly elegant. I'm really into a smaller case. And I got this through the Watch Preserve. Now, technically, I didn't buy it from the Watch Preserve, but the relationship I made through the Watch Preserve is how I ended up with this watch. There's a gentleman.
Yeah, you.
Oh, go ahead.
I know. I was just gonna say you're reading my mind because I want to start talking about the Watch Preserve and your connection with us
Yeah.
next because I actually don't know the origin story of how that all happened.
Oh, that's a pretty simple one. I'll tell you that one in a moment. But the Lord Elgin Clubman I got from a gentleman I met through the Watch Preserve. He's from my hometown in Michigan, which like natural connections, not that big of a city. Grand Rapids, Michigan, maybe 500,000 in the metro region.
Sure.
So not a very big town, even though it's the second largest city in Michigan. I love it to death. It's one of my favorite places in the world. So when you meet somebody from there, I mean, how can you not connect, right? So
Right.
I
Yeah.
went up and visited him in Grand Rapids. Turns out his uncle was the inventor of the Pop Tart. And so I got to visit his uncle and got a box of Pop Tarts signed
Of course you did. Oh man.
right here. Where's that signal? Yeah, right there. So I
Wow.
got the box of Pop Tarts signed, and he actually just died like a few weeks ago, which is crazy.
Oh,
He's
no
a
way.
really old man at this point. Yeah, he just died. So I literally, like, I sat down, drew his portrait. He signed a box of Pop Tarts for me, and then a couple weeks later, he died. There's also a movie that just premiered, or their trailer just launched, produced by Jerry Seinfeld, about the invention of the Pop Tart. That's about to come out this year.
Wow.
Uh, yeah, it's like,
Again, serendipity. You
yeah,
keep having these little moments, Matthew.
uh,
That's
some
crazy.
some
Uh,
wonderful
what
craziness
what
there.
flavor
I mean,
what flavor Pop Tart are you
brown
making?
sugar cinnamon.
Brown sugar cinnamon. He's a brown sugar cinnamon guy. You guys heard it here first.
That's
There you
right.
go.
That's right.
Uh, okay, there you go. So a cool Elgin tied to the Pop Tart dynasty. How about that?
Ooh,
Uh,
Pop Tart. That's a really. Now I want to make a watch called the
Pop.
Clubman Pop Tart. That sounds crazy. Let's move on from
And I
that.
think you could do it. You could call it a, instead of a waffle dial, just call it like a brown sugar cinnamon
I
dial.
mean,
And you know,
oh my God, that's got to happen. I'll figure it out.
this
That's gonna
yeah,
happen
well yeah,
someday.
well I tell you what, talk to the guys at Brew and maybe they can go off
That's
brand
right.
for a little bit and make a Pop Tart watch instead of a coffee watch. Um, so the Watch Preserve. Let's talk about the Watch Preserve. So that's where
Right.
I met you.
Yep.
And that's where a lot of your paintings are currently hanging up in the room right next door to me. So you paint here as sort of an attraction for us, and in exchange, you have a place to work and advertise some of your paintings. Did I get that right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that sounds about right. I met. Well, I mean, the story goes back a little bit further. So Nick is the owner founder of the Watch Preserve. He's the personality that makes it all run. And he
Mm-hmm.
he went to
Yeah.
school in Paris, Texas, and my brother-in-law also went to school in Paris, Texas, at the same time. So there was some crossover with
Serendipity.
them. Yeah. But I met Nick, I think maybe a year ago, almost exactly at this time, a year ago. He was walking by an exhibition that I had in downtown Fort Worth, Texas, and I don't remember if he walked in. He had Kate and Coco with him, so obviously we had to say hello to the dogs and
Sure.
chatted for a bit.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
For
yeah,
anybody who's not been in the store, with those are the two cute little dachshunds that our owners Nick and Katarina have. They're two little golden long hair dachshunds, and they're very cute. They're kind of
very
like the
cute.
mascots for the store.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I met them and I met Nick and or I met one of them. I don't know. It was Kate or Coco. Sometimes I forget which one is which. Uh, but yeah, so we met and he was trying to open up a store. He hadn't opened up the Watch Preserve brick and mortar location yet. And so we just stayed connected. And when he opened up, I came by and we just started talking. I wanted to do more with watches. Like Fort Worth, as much as Fort Worth is a big city, it's a small town, and the watch community, it's needed somewhere to coalesce. And I think the Watch Preserve has become that very quickly. I mean, very quickly. And even before it opened, Nick and I connected, and so
Mm.
it's the place to be in Fort Worth if you're interested in watches, just at all.
I, I appreciate you saying that. I totally agree. I have worked, as I mentioned before, over on the other side of the Metroplex in Plano, North Dallas, and I've been in the watch game now for very nearly a decade, and I always felt like the Fort Worth side of things was kind of severely lacking. There are a couple authorized dealers out here that are more traditional in what they
Mhm.
do and some of the brands that they carry, and finding a space primarily for vintage and for pre-owned stuff that's run by watch enthusiasts,
Mhm.
and it's a small business. We have the time to sit down and talk to the people coming in about their watches. I think is a really special thing. This episode will come out after we finish Open Streets on
Okay.
April 13th. So I'm hoping that a lot of you listening to this, we met on Saturday at Open Streets, and we're gonna try to keep doing more events like that in the future. We've got some stuff in the works, talking to some people. I can't say who, on some stuff we're gonna try to come up with soon to continue to foster this environment here. And from my point of view too, I think it's really special that we're not just pulling in only watch collectors, but we're able to pull in people like you, Matt,
Yeah.
that have a connection to the industry through their own very unique lens.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
That's very, very nifty.
I think it's because Nick is just interested in watches. That's what he cares about. So anybody who's interested in watches has a home, almost at any
Mm-hmm.
capacity. Now, if you like Rolex, I don't know, you might have to find a different home. But
Yeah, yeah, he's on the books about that one, isn't he?
yeah,
On the record.
but
Um,
really, he's just made a home. I think just because he's enthusiastic, he's passionate. And he brought. I don't. How did you guys meet actually, Michael? Because I one day you weren't there, and then I came in and you were there. Um,
yeah,
what about
I
this
do that.
point?
I just kind of appear out of thin air. Well, I show up where I'm needed.
Yeah.
The magical Michael. Um, I was actually working, so I was, my sort of MO is I'm on the road basically half the year doing the professional opera stuff, and when I'm not doing that, before I was working for an AD, and then actually I was working for a menswear store for a little bit out in Southlake,
Which one?
and they ended up they don't exist anymore.
Okay.
I'm not going to mention the name.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough.
But they ended up closing. Yeah, they ended up closing. I'll tell you after we go off air. They ended up closing kind of quickly, and that kind of left me going, okay, well, I got to find something else to do, and something that I always do, not even just to look for a job, but just look for a place to go look at watches. Is I'm always looking to see if there's new secondhand dealers or anything interesting around, and I just went on to Google and typed in watch store near me, and this one showed up that I hadn't seen before
Yeah.
called the Watch Preserve. And I said, huh, let's check these guys out. Oh, they got a cool selection of vintage stuff. Okay, okay, I could see they maybe need a new photographer. They need probably, they just opened. Let's see if they're hiring. And I came down and I interviewed with Katarina, our co-owner, and the next week I got the job.
Nice.
And here I am. So it turns out, speak of this kind of the sub theme of this first episode is serendipitous
Serendipity.
moments in this world. Katarina, I remember her saying to me, she's like, "How did you hear about us? Like, we just opened. We're not even really out there yet." And I said, "Well, I don't know. I just look for this kind of stuff." And then when I mentioned my skill set, watch photography, just general watch knowledge, sales, and everything like that, Nick was like, "That is exactly what we need to move us past these kind of opening, growing pains, and
Mm-hmm.
really get out there in the industry." So, for you as well, for me, and everybody else in the community here in Fort Worth, it's been a really special place. I think I talk all the time about how we can kind of break down some of these barriers about wanting to get into vintage watches or just
Mm-hmm.
watches in general at a place where a bigger store might not have time to sit down and walk you through your first purchase or just
Yeah.
chat to you about anything. So it's a very special place.
Yeah. I mean, the last 3 weeks I've been in, the same guy, I'm pretty sure, has been in at the same time trying to get this watch and maybe do a trade. I can't remember exactly what's happening, but he just keeps coming back in. I'm like, I don't think you do that unless one, you want the watch, but two,
Yeah.
you like the space, you like the people.
Yeah, we've got our list of return customers now at this point. We've got people that come in to do trades. We got people that don't even buy things. Maybe they got one watch from us a while ago, but sometimes they just come in to hang out,
Yeah.
which is fun too. So I'm hoping that as we add more events onto things, we can continue to foster that community.
Yeah.
Um, so for you, Matthew, what sort of stuff? We're kind of coming up on our 40-minute block here, so we're gonna start wrapping things down.
Okay.
What kind of stuff do you have coming up? If anything interesting, any more trips? Maybe PD next year, of course, I'm sure. Do you have anything in the works that you're particularly excited about?
Yeah, I mean, Pitti is always amazing. I try to show up both shows every year, June and January. So occasionally, you miss one here or there. But yeah, I'll try to be at that in June. That's coming up very fast.
Yeah.
Excited about that. I'm excited to put together a few collections of pieces. I have a whole series of these FP Journes I've been working on for forever. It's been my free time
Uh,
project. So technically, this one took 30 years. This one behind me, but really, it's taken 2.5 years because it's just been sitting around. And finally, I was able to finish it.
mhm.
Just had enough time, and there we go. But I have like
Sure.
13 of these waiting around. to be completed. There's another one over my right shoulder here that's waiting. It's waiting. It's almost there. It's been waiting for years. But the whole collection is exciting because I'm cresting over this idea to the point of completion. So I'm excited to see where this whole little collection will go. Yeah, I mean, I'm supposed to be going to Doha, Qatar. I'm saying it with my hand like a whisper because it's been on the docket for a while. I finished this giant 12-foot painting that 12 feet by 5 feet ish. It's actually in centimeters, but I can never remember the centimeters. I'm American, and
you can't do that conversion.
Yeah, no, not quickly. But it's enormous. I'm supposed to install this painting hopefully sooner rather than later. But really looking forward to that trip as well, because they have some crazy watches over there in the Middle East.
Is that trip to Doha for for a boutique or for a private client?
Private client. So I can probably say who it is, but it's not installed yet, so I won't say who it is yet.
Sure.
Obviously, I'll be sharing about that on social media and etc. once it's up. But yeah, so that's a private client, and then I'm hoping to meet up with a few watch collectors and discuss, this
definitely.
and that.
Yeah, sounds like you got some cool stuff coming up. The trip to Doha will be cool. I love seeing your content from PD Womo. I loved all your posts from the last trip around. How long have you been going out there?
Oh man. Oh wow. How long have I been going out there? That's a great question that I don't know the answer to. Probably since 2016 or 17.
Okay, so you're a PD veteran, as they say.
Yeah.
A vecchio PD Uomo, yeah?
Well, I mean, you're the one who knows more Italian than I do, but that sounds about right.
Very cool. Well, hey, we are wrapping up on our time here, it looks like. So before we sign off, where can the people find you? We're going to plug your socials, of course, and everything in the listing, but give us a rundown. Are you on Instagram? Are you on YouTube or anywhere else? Where can the people find you apart from here at the Watch Preserve and online?
Yeah, well, I mean, along with things I'm excited to do this year, you can also find me at the Watch Preserve on Saturdays, almost every Saturday, doing live paintings from about 12 to 3. So if you want to come in, look at watches, or see some cool watch art being created, Saturdays at the Watch Preserve is a great way to do it. Otherwise, social media, I'm at Sunflowerman, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, etc. Usually it's process videos of paintings, whether it's menswear or watches. Yeah.
Right. No, I thought of one last question before we go, and I can't believe I've never asked you this before.
Oh.
How did you get the name Sunflowerman?
Oh yeah, I mean, a fun little story. I grew up in Michigan. I would go to this summer camp every year since I was, I don't know, like 7 or 8 until I was 18. And this one year early on, we had this skit class. I don't know why we had a skit class this year, but the idea is this one day we had to reach into a bag and grab out an item. And whatever item you grabbed out, you had to utilize in a skit. So I reach into this bag and I pull something out. I look at it. It's a shower curtain covered in a sunflower pattern. So at this point, I was 10 years old. And I draped it over my shoulders, tied it off, and I became Sunflowerman.
And the legend was born.
The legend was born.
Very well. Hey, Matthew, thank you so much for taking a little time out of your day to chat with me. Like I said before, I'm glad we could sit down and do this and learn a little bit more about you. So for those listeners that haven't yet seen any of Matthew's paintings, like he said, come by, check him out at the Watch Preserve on Saturday. Definitely look at his Instagram. We'll post all of those links in the video and the podcast description for this episode. Thanks everybody for tuning in to the very first episode of the Timelines podcast by the Watch Preserve, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks.